what happens when the daughter they thought they were punishing ends up winning? Sister was deceived by money, while the other found true wealth where no one expected. This is a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and the ultimate revenge. Comment where you are watching from. Stay with me, because by the time this is over, you will question everything you believe about wealth and love. The air inside the Grand UCHE mansion was thick with tension. The lavish living room, adorned with golden chandeliers and imported Italian furniture, seemed to shrink under the weight of Chief Obina's anger. He paced the marble floor, his fists clenched, his nostrils flaring like a raging bull. Lady Angela sat on the plush white couch, her heavily jeweled fingers clasped together as she shook her head in disbelief. Between them stood Adobe, their eldest daughter, her spine straight, her chin raised in defiance. "I will not marry Chukwudi," she repeated, her voice firm, though her hands trembled slightly at her sides. "I do not love him." Chief Obina let out a deep growl, his thick, imposing figure towering over her. "Love," he barked. "What does love have to do with marriage? You think your mother and I married for love? We built this family on wealth, not foolish emotions." Lady Angela scoffed. "Adobe, you are embarrassing us. Do you know how many women in this city would give anything to be in your position? Chukwudi's father is one of the richest men in Lagos. You would never have to work a day in your life. You would have servants, luxury, and status." "But I don't want to marry for status, Mama," Adobe argued, her voice laced with frustration. "I want to marry a man who loves me, who respects me, not one who sees me as a trophy." Her younger sister, Ifunanya, let out a dry laugh from where she sat, scrolling through her phone. Unlike Adobe, Ifunanya had no problem marrying rich. To her, wealth was everything. "If you don't want him, I'll take him," she said with a smirk. "At least I understand the value of money." Adobe shot her a glare before turning back to her father. "Papa, please don't force me into this." Chief Obina slammed his hand against the glass table, making everyone flinch. "Enough. I have made my decision. You will marry Chukwudi, and that is final." Tears burned behind Adeobi's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "And if I refuse?" The air in the room shifted. A heavy silence fell. Chief Obina narrowed his eyes at her, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "Then you will marry a poor man instead?" Lady Angela gasped. "Obina, what are you saying?" "If she does not want to marry into wealth, then let her marry poverty," he said coldly. "She will marry a nobody, a common man from the village. Let her see how long love will sustain her." Adobe's heart pounded. "Papa, you can't be serious." "Oh, I am very serious," he said. "Since you think love is more important than wealth, you will marry a man with nothing." Lady Angela held her chest as if the very idea would give her a heart attack. "You want our daughter to marry a poor man. Do you want people to laugh at us? We will be disgraced." Chief Obina chuckled darkly. "No, Angela, the disgrace will be hers. She will live in poverty, struggle for food, fetch water from the stream, and wear the same clothes for years. Then she will understand what we were trying to teach her." Ifunanya burst into laughter. "Oh, this is too good? Adeobi, my dear sister, you will be washing clothes by the river, while I will be flying first class to Paris. How ironic." Adobe's hands curled into fists. She could feel the humiliation they were trying to inflict on her, but she refused to let them break her. Her father stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You have 24 hours to decide, Adobe. Marry Chukwudi, or I will find a poor man for you." The weight of his words settled deep in her bones. She wanted to fight, to argue, but she knew there was no winning against her father's stubborn pride. The thought of marrying a stranger terrified her, but she would rather face the unknown than be trapped in a loveless, materialistic marriage. So, with a deep breath, she lifted her chin and looked her father in the eye. "I choose the poor man." A shocked silence filled the room. Lady Angela clutched her pearls. Ifunia let out a gasp. Even Chief Obinna seemed momentarily taken aback. But then, a slow smirk crept across his face. "Good," he said. "Then your wedding will be in 1 week." Adaobi swallowed hard. She had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. As she turned away, she could hear Ifunia's mocking voice behind her. "Enjoy your suffering, dear sister." Adaobi didn't respond. She only walked to her room, her heart heavy, knowing that her life was about to change forever. The wedding was nothing short of an insult. Chief Obinna made it clear that this was not a celebration, but a punishment. There were no extravagant decorations, no imported flowers, and certainly no notable guests. Unlike Ifunia's upcoming wedding, which had the finest designers in Lagos planning every detail, Adaobi's wedding was thrown together in haste. The ceremony took place in a small village church, far away from the luxurious halls Adaobi had always imagined for herself. The pews were nearly empty, save for a few villagers who had come out of curiosity. None of her parents' wealthy friends were invited. Even Lady Angela, still reeling from the disgrace of having a daughter married to a commoner, barely spoke a word throughout the ceremony. Adaobi stood in front of the altar, her hands trembling as she looked at the man she was about to marry, Kenechukwu. A schoolteacher, a man of simple means. His posture was relaxed, his expression unreadable. Unlike her, he had not been forced into this marriage. He had agreed willingly, though Adaobi had no idea why. Did he not feel humiliated, knowing that her father had chosen him only to mock her? She had seen him a few times in the past. He was well respected in the village for his humility and intelligence. But he was far from the kind of man she had ever pictured herself with. He wore no designer suits, no expensive wristwatches, and certainly did not arrive at the church in an imported car. As the priest spoke, Adaobi felt the weight of her father's cruel lesson pressing down on her shoulders. "You will marry a poor man, and you will suffer. Let's see how long your so-called love will last." Her father's voice echoed in her mind, and she clenched her fists. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Kenechukwu turned to her, his deep brown eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place: pity, amusement, understanding. She expected a quick, impersonal peck on the cheek. Instead, he leaned in and gently kissed her forehead, his touch lingering just a second longer than necessary. It sent a shiver down her spine. She barely noticed the muted applause from the few guests. Her mind was spinning. And just like that, she was a married woman. Her father had not even gifted her with a proper send-off. No money, no possessions, not even a simple token of farewell. As they left the church, a beat-up old Toyota Corolla was waiting for them. It was a stark contrast to the Rolls-Royces and Bentleys that had lined the driveway of her family's mansion. "This is your new life now," Ifunia whispered smugly as Adaobi passed by. "No more fancy clothes, no more fine dining. Just you and your poor husband." Adaobi said nothing. She held her head high, refusing to give her sister the satisfaction of seeing her break. The drive to their new home was silent. Adaobi sat rigidly in the passenger seat, staring out the window as the cityscape faded into rural simplicity. She expected to be taken to a mud house, maybe a one-room apartment in the heart of the village. She had prepared herself for a life of struggle, of washing clothes by hand and fetching water from the stream. But when they arrived, she was met with a small but well-maintained bungalow. It was nothing compared to the mansion she had grown up in, but it was clean, cozy, and peaceful. "You can look around," Kenechukwu said as he unlocked the door. Adaobi hesitated before stepping inside. The house was simple but neat. The furniture was modest, the decorations minimal. But something about it felt warm, lived in. Kenechukwu carried her small bag, one of the few things she had been allowed to take from her father's house, and set it down gently. "I know this isn't what you're used to," he said, "but I promise you won't lack anything." Adaobi crossed her arms. "I don't need promises. I just need to know one thing." He raised an eyebrow. "What is that?" "Why did you agree to this marriage?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "You know my father chose you only to humiliate me. Why would you agree to be a part of his scheme?" For a moment, Kenechukwu simply looked at her, as if weighing his words. Then he smiled faintly. "Maybe I wanted to see if you were really as spoiled as everyone says." Adaobi's jaw tightened. "So this is a game to you?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "Not at all." He stepped closer, his gaze steady. "I agreed to marry you because I believe things happen for a reason. Maybe this is our fate." She scoffed. "Fate? My father chose you because you are poor." Something flashed in Kenechukwu's eyes, something unreadable. But he said nothing. Instead, he simply gave her a small nod. "Then let's see how this story unfolds." Adaobi felt an uneasy shiver run down her spine. There was something about the way he spoke, something she couldn't quite understand yet. But she had no time to dwell on it, because from that moment forward her new life had begun. And whether she liked it or not, she was now Adaobi Kenechukwu. The new zoo mansion was alive with music, laughter, and the scent of fresh roses flown in from France. Unlike Adaobi's rushed and modest wedding, Ifunenya's wedding to Ibuka was nothing short of a royal affair. The grand hall of the most luxurious hotel in Lagos glittered under the golden chandeliers. The bride, draped in a designer wedding gown, basked in the admiration of her guests. Her father had spared no expense, eager to display the wealth of the family. "This is what a real wedding looks like," Lady Angela said proudly, sipping champagne as she watched her younger daughter smile for the cameras. Ifunenya smirked, catching sight of her mother. She knew exactly who that jab was meant for. Adaobi. Her unfortunate sister, who was probably scrubbing floors in her poor husband's house while Ifunenya was sealing her future in luxury. She turned to Ibuka, her groom, and squeezed his hand. He looked stunning in his designer tuxedo, his wrist adorned with an expensive Rolex. Everything about him screamed wealth and success. As the wedding guests continued to praise the couple, Ifunenya leaned in and whispered, "Darling, I can't wait to see our new house. It must be beautiful." Ibuka smiled, his grip on her waist tightening slightly. "Of course, my love. It's a mansion fit for a queen." Ifunenya giggled, already envisioning the luxurious life ahead. She had won. Or so she thought. While Ifunenya celebrated her grand wedding, Adaobi sat quietly in her new home, still struggling to adjust to the life she had been forced into. But something was strange. Life was not as difficult as she had expected. When she had first arrived, she had prepared herself for hardship, poverty, hunger, endless struggles. She had braced herself for sleepless nights, wondering where their next meal would come from. But days turned into weeks, and the suffering never came. Instead, Kenechukwu ensured she lacked nothing. The house, though small, was always stocked with food. He took her to the market and never hesitated to buy whatever she wanted. Even when she asked for a few basic clothing items, he paid for them without flinching. One evening, as they ate dinner, she found herself staring at him. "You don't struggle to pay for things," she said suspiciously. Kenechukwu looked up from his plate, amused. "Should I? You are a schoolteacher," she said, "and yet you always have money. You never complain. You don't even hesitate when you spend." He leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes studying her. "Does it bother you?" "No," she admitted. "It just doesn't make sense." He smiled faintly but said nothing. Adaobi frowned, her mind spinning. There was something about him that didn't add up. But for now, she let it go. Ifunenye's dream life began to unravel just 2 months after her wedding. It started with small things. First, the credit card she used for shopping was declined. She had assumed it was a mistake until it happened again. Then, the staff in their supposed mansion started disappearing. The gardener left. The housekeeper resigned. The driver stopped coming to work. When she asked Ebuka, he brushed it off. "They're just lazy. I'll hire new ones." But the real nightmare began when a group of men in suits knocked on their door one morning. "Who are you?" Ifunenye asked, confused as she opened the door. One of the men, holding a briefcase, adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. "We are from the bank, ma'am. We're here to discuss your husband's debts." Ifunenye's heart skipped a beat. Debts? Yes, he owes millions in unpaid loans. This house, the cars, the businesses, they were all acquired with borrowed money. The words felt like a physical slap. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Ebuka is rich. Ebuka has been running from his creditors for years," the man interrupted. "And now, it's time to pay up." Before she could react, her husband walked in, his expression calm as if nothing unusual was happening. "Ifunenye," he said, his voice smooth, "we need to talk." The bank official handed her an official notice. "Ma'am, this property is being seized. You have 7 days to vacate." The room spun. Her head pounded as she turned to her husband, who didn't even look surprised. "You lied to me," she choked out. Ebuka's lips curled into a smirk. "Did I? Or did you just see what you wanted to see?" Tears filled her eyes. "You tricked me," he chuckled, folding his arms. "And you married me because you thought I was rich. So tell me, who really fooled who?" Ifunenye's legs trembled. This was not the fairy tale she had imagined. She had married an illusion. And now, reality was crashing down around her. Back in the village, Adobe sat on the porch, enjoying the cool evening breeze. She had spent the day with Kenechukwu, visiting the school where he worked. Watching him interact with the children had surprised her. He was patient, kind, and well-respected. It was strange how, despite everything, she found herself feeling at peace, but something still didn't sit right with her. Kenechukwu was always composed, never worried, never scrambling for money like other teachers she had met. And then, fate decided to answer her questions in the most unexpected way. That evening, as they sat in the living room, a sleek black SUV pulled up outside their house. Adobe frowned. "Are you expecting someone?" Kenechukwu's expression didn't change. Not really. The car door opened, and 3 well-dressed men stepped out. One of them, an older man in a sharp suit, walked up to the porch. "Sir," he said respectfully, nodding at Kenechukwu. "The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow." Adobe's breath hitched. "Sir?" Kenechukwu sighed and stood up. "I'll be there." The man nodded again and left. Adobe stared at her husband, her heartbeat accelerating. Board meeting? What board meeting? Kenechukwu ran a hand over his face, exhaling. "Ada, there's something I need to tell you." She swallowed hard, feeling like the ground beneath her was shifting. "What?" He met her eyes. "I am not just a school teacher. I own one of the largest private school chains in the country. I also have multiple real estate investments." Adobe felt her world tilt. Her father had thrown her into this marriage to humiliate her. He had wanted her to suffer, but instead she had unknowingly married a billionaire. Her mind reeled as she processed the revelation, and for the first time in weeks, a slow smile spread across her lips. She had won in the most unexpected way. Adobe sat in stunned silence, her heart pounding like a drum inside her chest. The air between her and Kenechukwu was thick with unspoken words. Her husband, the man she had assumed was a simple schoolteacher, was in reality a wealthy businessman. The weight of the revelation pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. She stared at him, her mind racing. You're not poor? Kenechukwu sighed, running a hand through his hair. No, Ada, I never was. She let out a shaky breath, her fingers gripping the edge of the couch. Then why did you let everyone believe that you were? He leaned forward, his dark eyes watching her carefully. Because I needed to find a woman who would love me for who I am, not for my wealth. Adeobi scoffed, shaking her head in disbelief. So, this was a test? In a way, yes. He hesitated, then continued. I was raised to understand the dangers of money. I've seen families torn apart, marriages destroyed, all because of wealth. When a person has money, they can never truly be sure if they are loved for themselves or for what they have. Adobe blinked, trying to process his words. So you pretended to be a poor school teacher? Kenechukwu chuckled lightly. Not exactly. I am a teacher, I love teaching, but my businesses run on their own. I have managers and executives who handle the operations while I focus on the things that truly matter to me. Adobe's lips parted slightly as realization dawned on her. All the small things she had ignored suddenly made sense. The way he never struggled to pay for things. The way he never flinched when buying anything. The expensive wristwatch she had once spotted in his drawer, but had assumed was a gift. The way the villagers respected him, not just as a teacher, but as something more. How long were you going to keep this a secret? She whispered. Kenechukwu exhaled deeply. I wasn't sure. But I was waiting for the right moment. And now I think you deserve to know the truth. Adobe swallowed hard, emotions swirling inside her. Her father had forced her into this marriage, believing it was a punishment. But instead, he had unknowingly given her the best life she could have ever dreamed of. She let out a breathless laugh, shaking her head. If my father finds out, Kenechukwu smirked. It will be interesting, won't it? Adobe met his gaze, and for the first time since the wedding, she didn't feel trapped. Instead, she felt safe. And just maybe, she had been given a greater blessing than she had ever imagined. While Adobe was discovering her unexpected fortune, Ifununia's world was crumbling around her. She sat in her now half-empty mansion, her fingers trembling as she stared at the eviction notice on the table. Ibuka had disappeared. The man she had married for his wealth had turned out to be nothing but a con artist. His entire life had been a lie. The cars, the house, the expensive gifts, it had all been built on borrowed money. And now, the creditors were coming for everything. Ifunia had begged him to fix things, to find a way out, but he had only laughed in her face. You married me for my money, didn't you? He had said coldly. But there was never any money, Ma. Now she was left alone, humiliated and broken. The news of her disgrace spread like wildfire. Friends who had once envied her now whispered behind her back. The same people who had congratulated her on her grand wedding were now mocking her downfall. And worst of all, she had nowhere to go. The luxurious lifestyle she had flaunted was gone. She had no choice but to return to her parents' house, dragging herself back in shame. Lady Angela was devastated. My daughter, she wept as Ifunia collapsed into her arms. How could this happen? Chief Obina, however, was furious. You were supposed to marry into wealth. How could you be so foolish? Ifunia sobbed, her once proud demeanor shattered. Papa, I thought he was rich. He lied to me. Chief Obina clenched his fists. And now our name is being dragged through the mud. Do you have any idea how much disgrace this has brought to this family? Ifunia buried her face in her hands. I was wrong, Papa. I was wrong. But it was too late. She had chosen a man for his wealth, and now she had nothing. 3 days later, news reached Chief Obina about Adobe's true fate. At first, he had ignored her entirely, believing she was living in suffering with a poor schoolteacher. But when he overheard businessmen at his club discussing the powerful real estate mogul Kenechukwu, he nearly choked on his drink. "The man is a genius," one of them said. "He keeps a low profile, but he owns some of the biggest private schools and real estate companies in the country. I heard he recently got married," another added. Chief Obina frowned, suddenly paying attention. "Married? To who?" "To some girl from the village. Poor thing probably didn't even know who she married." Obina's blood ran cold. Could it be? Heart pounding, he called his driver. "Take me to Adobe's house. Now." "Oh." When Chief Obina arrived at the estate, his jaw nearly hit the ground. The house was massive. A grand, elegant mansion stood in the middle of a well-manicured compound. Expensive cars lined the driveway, and well-dressed staff moved about, attending to their duties. This was no village house. This was wealth. Pure, undeniable wealth. The gates opened and there stood Adobe, looking radiant in a simple yet elegant dress. Behind her, Kenechukwu stood with his hands in his pockets, watching silently. Chief Obina's face turned red. "Adobe, what is this?" Adobe folded her arms. "My home, Papa." He blinked rapidly. This is your home?" "Yes," she said with a small smile. "My husband's home." Obina felt like the world was spinning. He turned to Kenechukwu. "You, who are you, really?" Kenechukwu smirked slightly. "Exactly who I said I was. I just never mentioned the rest." Obina's face twisted in disbelief. He had thrown his daughter away, expecting her to suffer. Instead, she had married a man wealthier than even him. Meanwhile, Ifunia, who had married for riches, was now living in disgrace. The irony was almost too much to bear. Lady Angela, who had just arrived behind her husband, gasped as she took in the scene. "Adobe, my daughter." Adobe lifted her chin. "You judged a man by his appearance, Mama, but now you see wealth is not always loud." Obina swallowed his pride, forcing himself to speak. "My daughter, please forgive me." Kenechukwu stepped forward, wrapping an arm around Adobe's waist. "She already has. But let this be a lesson: true wealth is not in money, but in the heart." And with that, the gates closed behind them. Obina and Lady Angela stood outside, humbled and speechless. For the first time in their lives, they had finally learned the true meaning of wealth. When they arrived at Adobe's estate, the sight of the grand mansion still left Chief Obina breathless. No matter how many times he tried to prepare himself, it was still difficult to accept. They were escorted inside, where Adobe and Kenechukwu sat in the luxurious sitting room. Lady Angela's eyes immediately filled with tears at the sight of her daughter, looking radiant and happy. "Adobe," she whispered. Adobe studied them, her expression unreadable. "Mama." "Papa, what brings you here?" Chief Obina cleared his throat. He had never been a man who admitted to being wrong, but this time he had no choice. We came to apologize," he said, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. Lady Angela clutched Adobe's hands, tears slipping down her cheeks. "My daughter, please forgive us. We were blinded by money, by status. We thought we were securing the best future for you, but we didn't realize we were pushing you towards misery." Adobe was silent for a long moment. Then she exhaled softly. "I understand now why you did what you did," she said. "You believed money was the only path to happiness, but you never considered love, respect, or character." Chief Obina nodded, swallowing hard. "And we were wrong." Kenechukwu, who had been watching quietly, finally spoke. "Sir, wealth is not just about money. True wealth is in kindness, wisdom, and humility. A man's value is not determined by the size of his bank account, but by his heart." Chief Obina sighed deeply. "I see that now." Adobe's gaze shifted to Ifunia, who had been quiet the entire time. For the first time in her life, Ifunia looked vulnerable. "I was cruel to you," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I thought you were foolish for rejecting wealth. But I was the fool. Adobe reached forward and took her sister's hands. I don't hold it against you, Ifunina. We all learn lessons in different ways. Tears spilled down Ifunia's cheeks, and for the first time in years she hugged her sister tightly. I'm so sorry, Ada. Adobe held her close. It's okay. What matters is that we move forward. The visit lasted hours. They spoke, they laughed, and they reflected on everything that had happened. Before they left, Chief Obinna looked at Kenechukwu with genuine respect. I misjudged you, he admitted. You are a better man than I ever realized, and I am proud that my daughter is with someone like you. Kenechukwu smiled. Thank you, sir. I will always protect and cherish her. As the Nuzas walked back to their car, Chief Obinna felt something he hadn't felt in years' peace. He had lost his arrogance, his obsession with money, but he had gained something more valuable. A lesson, a new understanding of what truly mattered in life. And as he watched his daughters embrace one last time before they left, he realized that for the first time in a long while, his family was whole again. Join me next time for more captivating stories. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Before you go, help me grow this community. Hit that like button for more thrilling content, subscribe for new uploads, comment below with your theories and reactions. Share with friends and family who love a good story. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for being an amazing part of this journey.